and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Ahead of the August 1st trade deadline, South Korea's top trade officials held talks with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington, who failed to make a trade deal. Much of South Korea is under a scorching heat dome, pushing temperatures far above normal. The daytime temperature in Seoul is expected to go up to 37 degrees today and 38 tomorrow. French President Emmanuel Macron says France will recognize Palestine as a state at the UN General Assembly in September. With time running out, high-level trade talks between Seoul and Washington have stalled, raising concerns over looming U.S. tariffs. Our Relentless starts us off.
With just a week remaining before the U.S. imposes reciprocal tariffs, South Korean and U.S. trade officials met in Washington, D.C., but failed to reach a deal. On Thursday local time, Industry Minister Kim Jong-un and Chief Trade Negotiator Yo Han-gu held an hour-long meeting with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. The meeting had originally been scheduled as a high-level session involving both countries' trade and finance ministers, but was abruptly changed after U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent cancelled due to scheduling conflicts. South Korea's trade ministry said that Seoul proposed deepening cooperation in manufacturing in sectors such as shipbuilding, semiconductors, and batteries, and urged that tariffs, especially on automobiles, be reduced. Although the meeting ended without a solid deal, the ministry revealed that the two sides agreed to hold follow-up talks as soon as possible. Meanwhile, South Korea's National Security Advisor Wi Sung-rak returned to Seoul on Thursday afternoon following a 4-day visit to the U.S. Wi said he met with several top officials and fully conveyed Seoul's position on the matter.
I talked with key officials, including National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, Deputy National Security Advisor Andy Baker, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to support upcoming working-level talks. The negotiation process is now underway.
According to the presidential office, Rubio was unable to attend the in-person meeting due to an unexpected call from President Trump, but the two held a phone consultation instead, during which Rubio apologized for the last-minute cancellation. In the lead-up to the meeting, the U.S. turned up the pressure on Seoul by highlighting its trade deal with Japan that rolled back its tariffs from 25% to 15%. Lutnick told CNBC in an interview that as South Korea very much wants to make a deal, he could imagine the reactions when Tokyo struck a trade deal with Washington, saying that he could hear the expletives. Trump on the same day remarked that other countries could see tariff reductions if they make large-scale investments like Japan. With automobiles being a major export to the U.S. for both South Korea and Japan, there are concerns that Korean car makers could be placed at a disadvantage if Seoul fails to secure a similar reduction in tariffs. Looking ahead, Kim is set to meet with the chair of the White House National Energy Council, while Yo will hold separate meetings with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to further discuss tariffs and energy cooperation. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
With just a week left until the August 1st deadline, as we just heard, South Korea's trade officials held talks in Washington, seeking to reach an agreement with the Trump administration. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Park Min-jung, professor at the Department of Business Administration at Kumo National Institute of Technology. Professor Park, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me today.
So South Korea's trade officials are in Washington to meet with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington there. What might have been discussed between the two sides, and what exactly is the U.S. asking from Korea, and what cards does South Korea hold in tariff negotiations?
Yes, I guess the first deadline years for tariffs, Korea and the U.S. are in strategic talks that go well beyond tariff issues, touching on broader economy and geopolitical priorities. So the agenda's items include like the U.S. is expected to push for expanded local production and investment by Korean companies, especially in critical sectors like semiconductors, electrical vehicles, and batteries. This aligns with America's goal of reshoring jobs and securing its supply chains. And also, tariffs issues related to autos and steels will likely be a focal point. So the Trump administration previously threatened up to 25% tariffs, and although deferred, those threats may resurface. So Korea will aim for long-term tariff stability. South Korea, however, holds some strong negotiation leverage in its negotiation cards. First, Korean conglomerates, Samsung, SK, or Hyundai and LG, have committed to over $100 billion as in U.S. investments, which Washington cannot easily dismiss. And also, second, Korea plays a critical role in global supply in semiconductor markets. So marketing is indispensable to U.S. tech strategy. So in short, this is not just a trade deal, but it's a multi-layered negotiation involving industrial policy, security alignment, and reconfiguration of supply chains these days.
Right, and based on the trade agreement Japan reached with the Trump administration, what do you think a deal will look like for South Korea?
The recent trade deal between the U.S. and Japan clearly set a very clear precedent. By reducing auto tariffs from 25% to 15%, the U.S. secured $550 billion in Japanese investment and greater agriculture access, demonstrating the tangible economic returns are now standard in negotiations. So this formula will almost certainly apply to South Korea. So the U.S. isn't looking for vague commitments. It wants a very clearly signed agreements that bring in factories, jobs, and long-term supply chain security. Korean companies in semiconductors, batteries, and electrical vehicles will face direct pressure to expand their U.S. footprint. In exchange, Korea may secure tariff relief on core exports like autos and steel, but only if it delivers measurable strategic value.
I see, and you mentioned the auto industry in Japan succeeded in lowering tariffs on their auto imports. Since Japan is one of South Korea's biggest competitors in the auto industry, there are concerns that if Seoul fails to lower its tariffs to a similar level, its competitiveness in the U.S. market could decline. What's your take on this?
Japan's success in reducing auto tariffs from 25% to 50% is a major development, especially considering that Japan and South Korea directly compete in the U.S. auto market, particularly in electric vehicles and hybrids. If Korea fails to secure a similar tariff reduction, Korea's automakers may find themselves at a disadvantage compared to Japan. This pricing gap could quickly erode their market share in the U.S., which is highly sensitive to both cost and brand perception. To stay competitive, South Korea will need to go beyond simply asking for tariff relief. Washington is seeking concrete returns, expanded U.S. production, local job creation, and also secure supply chains. Korea's negotiation strategy must emphasize measurable contributions, not just alliance rhetoric. So finally, we can conclude that with Japan having already secured the favored terms, Korea must act swiftly and strategically to avoid losing ground in a market value where timing and positioning are everything.
I see. And South Korea is also reportedly considering investing at least $100 billion in the United States, backed by major companies here such as Samsung, SK, Hyundai Motors, and LG. What are your thoughts on this?
This South Korea's expanded investment by major conglomerates in the U.S. carries strategic significance beyond mere economic cooperation. First, it serves as a very critical tool to enhance political and diplomatic bargaining power. From the US perspective, such investments contribute directly to key policy goals like job creation and supply chain restructuring and revitalization of domestic manufacturing. So by linking this investment with trade negotiations, Korea can secure more favorable outcomes. And also, it represents an adaptive strategy aligned with the global trend of de-risking from China and also reshoring. By establishing local operations, particularly in high-tech sectors like semiconductors and batteries, Korean firms can reduce regulatory risks and accelerate localization in the long term. So to ease the financial burden of these large-scale investments, coordinate government support through subsidies, tax breaks, and regulatory aid is essential.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how the negotiations play out. All right, Professor Park, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Two American lawmakers have reintroduced a bill to provide work visas for highly skilled South Korean nationals. Republican lawmaker Young Kim and Democrat lawmaker Sidney Kamlager on Thursday introduced the Partner with Korea Act as part of an effort to encourage more collaboration between South Korean and U.S. businesses. The bill seeks to create an allotment of 15,000 E4 highly skilled work visas for South Korean nationals with specialized education or expertise. Kim, who is the chairwoman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee on East Asia and the Pacific, stressed that South Korea's highly skilled workforce can help support the U.S. economic and national security amid rising threats in the Indo-Pacific. The bill was previously introduced in the 113th, 116th, 117th, and 118th Congresses, but did not pass in any of those sessions. SK hynix reported record preliminary earnings and profit in the second quarter due to high demand in premium AI chips. However, Hyundai Motor Group saw a decline in profit due to the 25% U.S. reciprocal tariffs on automobiles. Our Park Junan reports.
South Korean tech giant SK hynix reported record-breaking preliminary second quarter earnings on Wednesday. The driving force behind SK hynix's strong earnings was its competitiveness in high-value, high-bandwidth memory, a key product in the AI sector. SK hynix reported an operating profit of 9.2 trillion won, or some $6.7 billion, up 68.5% compared to the second quarter of last year. Its revenues hit a record 22.2 trillion won, or $16.2 billion, a 35.4% on-year surge. SK hynix's dominance in premium HBM chips has propelled its earnings as it rides the AI wave by supplying tech giants like Nvidia, Broadcom, and Amazon. Meanwhile, Hyundai Motor Group posted a 15.8% drop in operating profit. The 3.6 trillion won operating profit, roughly $2.6 billion, is the steepest decline in 5 years. This comes despite record revenues of 48.2 trillion won, up 7.3%. The main reason for this disparity is the 25% U.S. tariff on automobiles imposed since April, which has hurt the company's profitability despite robust U.S. sales, as consumers bought cars early to avoid expected price increases. Hyundai's global sales grew by 0.8% to 1,065,000 units, fueled by a 36.4% increase in eco-friendly vehicle sales, particularly hybrid cars. However, the costs of tariffs and stronger incentives to stay competitive in the market have squeezed profits, causing the operating profit margin to fall to 7.5%.
In the case of Hyundai and Kia, they haven't raised their U.S. selling prices despite the 25% tariff, essentially not factoring the tariff into their pricing. That puts pressure on their profits. And if the situation continues, it will remain a disadvantage for Hyundai.
With just 8 days left until the August 1st reciprocal tariffs deadline, attention is on how any potential deal will impact Korea's main exports. Park Junan, Arirang News.
A heat wave warning has been issued for most parts of the nation, with the capital Seoul expected to see daytime temperature rise to 37 degrees Celsius today. The number of days with extreme heat and tropical nights is now the second highest on record, with a week to go until August. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
A heatwave warning has been issued nationwide, with sweltering temperatures making a return. The heatwave warning was also issued for all of Seoul on Thursday, with the capital back under the highest level notice for the first time in 11 days. The previous heatwave warning for Seoul was issued from July 7th to the 13th. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, the mercury readings for Seoul will continue to hover in the high 30s, with Friday expected to see daytime highs at 37 degrees Celsius, 38 degrees on Saturday, and 37 on Sunday. A heat wave warning is issued when the maximum perceived temperature is forecast to remain above 33 degrees for at least 2 consecutive days. This summer's heat has intensified more rapidly than usual, with both daytime highs and overnight lows hitting record levels. When compared to the same period in previous years, conditions have surpassed even the notorious summers of 1994 and 2018. Also, the number of days with extreme heat and tropical nights is now the second highest on record. The sweltering summer is also leading to a rising number of heat-related illnesses. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, a total of 107 people sought emergency treatment for heat-related conditions across the country on Thursday alone, with 1 fatality reported in Paju, Gyeonggi-do Province. Since May 15th, the number of patients stood at 1,963, nearly 3 times higher than the same period last year. Deaths have more than tripled from 3 last year to 10 this year. Heat-related illnesses are acute conditions caused by excessive heat exposure, typically accompanied by symptoms such as headache, dizziness, muscle cramps, and fatigue. Without timely treatment, these can lead to loss of consciousness and can be life-threatening. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over in Southeast Asia, Thailand's health minister has said that at least 12 people have been killed and 14 wounded in the country's conflict with Cambodia. Our Cha Eun-kyung reports.
At least 12 Thais, mainly civilians, have been killed as Thai and Cambodian troops exchanged fire on Thursday morning in a disputed border area. The Royal Thai Army said that the deaths occurred in at least 3 different provinces along the Thai-Cambodia border. Thailand has accused Cambodia of firing heavy weapons, such as BM-21 rocket launchers and artillery, into a Thai village and a hospital. Thailand also says it has carried out airstrikes on Cambodian military targets. Both sides have accused the other of firing the first shots. Anti-personnel landmines within Thai territory also caused injuries to Thai soldiers who were patrolling on Wednesday. This follows injuries from a landmine last week. As a result, Thailand has closed its entire border with Cambodia after telling all its nationals there to leave, while Cambodia has downgraded its ties with Thailand to the lowest level.
Now we have escalated the measures to level 4, which involves the complete closure of all border checkpoints along the Thai-Cambodian border.
Thursday's fighting has ramped up a long-standing border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. Recent border tensions in May led to the death of 1 Cambodian soldier. Cha Eun-kyung, Arirang News.
Now let's take a look at some stories from around the world with our Choi-ji. Good morning, Ji.
Good morning, Enzi.
So, Ji, let's begin with France's move to recognize Palestine as a state.
Sure. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced that it will recognize Palestine as a state. President Macron stated in a social media post on Thursday that France will formalize its recognition of the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September in support of sustainable peace in the Middle East. Macron emphasized that ending the Gaza war, securing the release of hostages, demilitarizing Hamas, and delivering massive humanitarian aid are urgent priorities that his decision supports. The move makes France home to the largest Jewish and Muslim populations in Western Europe, the first G7 country to recognize Palestinian statehood. while the Palestinian Authority welcomed the announcement, calling it proof of France's support for international law and Palestinian self-determination. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denounced it as rewarding terror. The state of Palestine is currently recognized by more than 140 of the 193 UN member countries. In Russia, a plane crash in the far east of the country killed all 48 people on board. The An-24 passenger plane operated by Angara Airlines was en route from Khabarovsk to Tinda with a stopover in Blagoveshchensk near the Chinese border. The plane disappeared from radar near Tinda shortly after 1 p.m. local time before rescue crews discovered its burning fuselage on a hillside. On board were 6 crew members and 42 passengers, including 5 children. Regional officials have confirmed that none had survived. The aircraft was built in 1976 and had been in service for nearly 5 decades. Despite a history of mechanical incidents, it had recently passed a safety inspection. A criminal investigation has been launched into suspected air traffic violations. President Vladimir Putin offered condolences, and the Amur region in Russia's Far East declared 3 days of mourning. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi formally signed a free trade agreement in London on Thursday, promising tariff cuts and increased market access for both economies. The agreement aims to increase bilateral trade by approximately $34 billion, marking Britain's most significant bilateral trade deal since Brexit. The pact reduces India's average tariff on UK goods from around 15% to 3%, including the immediate halving of tariffs on Scotch whisky from 150% to 75%, and duties on British automobiles from over 100% to roughly 10%. American pro wrestling legend Hulk Hogan died on Thursday in Florida after suffering a cardiac arrest. Hogan, whose real name was Terry Bollea, was the biggest professional wrestler of the 1980s and 90s, transforming the World Wrestling Federation, which later became the WWE, into a global entertainment powerhouse. With his iconic Hulkamania persona, Hogan won the world champion title 12 times and popularized wrestling through crossovers into film, reality TV, and pop culture. Figures across wrestling, entertainment, and politics, including President Trump, paid tribute, while the WWE described him as one of pop culture's most recognizable figures.
The heat is really ramping up here in Korea. As you can see, heat wave warnings are now active in most regions. So we are certainly in for a stretch of searing hot weather. And this intense heat is actually expected to climax this coming weekend. The reason behind this escalating heat wave is quite significant. Both the North Pacific high pressure system and the Tibetan high pressure system are extending their influence over the Korean Peninsula. Furthermore, the simultaneous movement of 3 typhoons from the south is sending those hot air into our region. And today there will be nothing but sunshine with UV rays to be very strong in the entire country. Western regions will be hotter through the weekend. Seoul, Daejeon topping out at 37 degrees this afternoon. Daegu, Chuncheon at 35 degrees. And due to the indirect effect of that typhoon mentioned earlier, Jeju will experience strong winds and rain this weekend. So please, if you plan to be near the water this weekend, stay safe.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.